Hi, Chris. Welcome back to Movie Junk. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for making your return to Movie Junk. And we have a very, very special guest joining us today who needs no introduction. We have Chris Tardio, who fans can currently see on Power Book Force on Starz. No surprise, Soprano fans know him as the ruthless gangster Sean Gismonte. You also appear on Amazon Prime's Gravesend. Seen you on Ray Donovan. Loved you and analyzed that and so many more. I can't thank you enough for joining today, Chris.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I feel like you've just been quite busy since the last time we spoke, right? I mean, I doesn't matter what I'm watching on TV, and I just happen to see you on everything these days.
I've had a couple good years, thank God. Yeah, I mean, it's been good. Not since the strike and all. It's been very quiet, but yeah, thank God everything has been going pretty good.
And I do want to jump right into Power Book Force, right? So if I'm not mistaken, this is the third spinoff now of the hit Power show, and you play Lieutenant Bobby DiFranco. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that we're seeing your character in the Power universe, correct?
It is, yes. I'll give you a funny story. I actually met Joe Sikora, who's Tommy, of course. We both tested for Tommy years ago in
Wow.
the original Power. And that's how we met, and we befriended each other on that testing process. And obviously, he got the part, and they definitely picked the right guy. He is that guy. He's actually not. He's nothing like that, but he plays it so well. Like it was definitely meant for him. And ironically, all these years later, I end up on the spinoff of Tommy's character. So it's pretty cool.
And he's amazing, right? I mean, he joined the Power universe since the beginning, and I was introduced to him initially on not Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire. He was in the
Oh,
beginning of Boardwalk Empire. He was the character of Steve Buscemi's, who ended up being his wife. His wife, that was her original husband, and he was abusive, and he was a drunk, and he eventually got whacked by Nucky Thompson and crew. But that's the first time he played an Irishman. And that was the first time that I saw him. And then when I saw him in Power, I was like, that's the guy. And he's obviously had an amazing career since then.
yeah, he's done really well. He was doing the Irish accent.
Yes,
He's like a master of accents. It's quite interesting. Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And so I mean, love to hear. I mean, so what was coming full circle, right? So how did the role come about? What was the audition process like? How did you find yourself making yourself on the show with the season?
I got an audition. I actually got a phone call from my old manager, who I guess was in a conversation with the casting director, and she said, "You're going to get an appointment for this Power Book Four Force, or yeah, it's Four Force." And she's like, "So just be prepared." And next thing you know, the audition came, and I originally auditioned, and then they came back and they asked me about a Chicago accent and to retape it with a Chicago accent. And I am not particularly gifted in that area of accent. So I actually spoke to Joe, who is a Chicago native, and he introduced me to two guys who were, great and made themselves available. One was a former cop, and the other is a construction worker. And they helped me with the accent, and I retaped and sent it with a Chicago accent. And then I didn't hear anything for like 2 days. And then I get a text from Joe, and he's like, they were talking about the deal. And he had said, just keep your agents in check about the deal or whatever. And I said, does that mean I got the part? he goes, oops, like it was the first I heard, and then I said, so the Chicago accent worked. And he said, let's put it this way, you're going to be from New York. So
Oh, there you go. They made it work for you.
yeah, so and that's how it happened. Next thing you know, I was there, and it was really an incredible experience working on that show. I had a great time. It was going there to Chicago, having a friend who is the lead of the show and introducing me to the cast and bringing me into that world was really special. And it was a fantastic experience. Like loved working with all the guys and ladies, and it was, yeah, it was really special.
Amazing. And 50 Cent, who's, an executive producer, did you have to meet with him at all, or is he
I
still
did not meet him. No, I did not meet him.
on there? Yeah, just bring it, because I actually just recently, because 50 Cent now is on a tour, and actually just recently saw 50 Cent. He came locally here and performed, and he performed the Power song. And yeah, it's one of those hits, man. The theme song from Power. I mean, it's one of those hit songs as well.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting how he got into all of it, huh? He's become quite inspirational to a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, he also has a new movie coming out now, The Expendables, which is actually just came out yesterday evening. So, yeah, I mean, he's just making hit music, and obviously in films as well, and definitely all of his projects, right? But were you a fan and like of the previous iterations of Power? Like, were you watching on from the beginning, or like did you come in with a clean slate?
I watched some of the original series, not the spin-offs, and yeah, I kind of did come in with a clean slate because I hadn't watched the first season. I to be quite honest, I don't really watch much television, but once I booked it, I went and watched the season. I was like, oh wow, okay, like this is where it's come, and um, yeah, I was just thrilled to finally get into this Power world.
And there's another Tommy on that joined this season. It was Tommy Flanagan, who we know from
Hmm.
Sons of Anarchy as Chibs. I've been a huge fan of his, since Braveheart, uh,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the Gladiator, all the Moose Sons that he's been in. I can't not ask a Tommy Flanagan question. What was it like working with him?
Tommy's great. Unfortunately, I didn't have scenes with Tommy. Oh, is that a spoiler? I don't know. But Tommy he's a sweetheart. He was great. I got to know him a little, and yeah, it was I'm also a big fan. So it's always cool when you get to meet people who you admire, whose work you admire, and then you see that they're a good person as well. And it's kind of like, oh wow, all right, good. Thank God, because I've also had to go the other way where you meet people that you admire, and they're not what you might have hoped. But with Flanagan, he was all of the above. He was great. So
Is he anything like him? He usually, he comes off as, he plays the tough guy, roles, right? Is he anything like the characters that he plays, or is he a sweetheart, or what's he like as a person?
he's a sweetheart. No, he's not at all. He doesn't come off like that. I mean, you know what I mean? Obviously, he
Yeah.
can access it, but no, in real life, he's not like that. Nor is Joe. He's so different. That's what's great. Like people don't realize what a good actor, they know he's a good actor, right? But then when you meet him in real life, you're like, oh wow, he's nothing like this guy. So it's great. It's great watching them and just always learning and picking up little things, along the way.
Now I know you can't, say much, right? Obviously the show is still running, but I mean, what can fans expect for the rest of the season?
Oh, they can expect some good story development and some exciting, suspenseful stuff. That's about as much as I could say.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. And again, like, we're used to seeing, maybe just selfishly, right? I love seeing you in the mobster roles, but when we see you do, because you do bring, different elements of some of the different characters that you play that I see resonating in this character as well too. Because there's you have a good conscience, but I feel like there's more to your character that we're still gonna see as well too. So I'm really excited to kind of see where it all pans out. Every season finale, I mean, every with the Power series, I've been following on since the beginning, and there's just always this, super super climatic ending, right, that just leads into additional storytelling is just amazing with this series, and it's obviously a testament to it lasting this long, and also different versions of it as well too, different spin-offs.
Yeah, well, this season they brought on a new showrunner, Gary Lennon, and this I thought the scripts are fantastic. My stuff, I'm really happy with. They wrote me really, really well, and you will not be disappointed with the finale of this season. It is climactic, and it's pretty awesome. And yeah, I mean, great writing team. Everybody on the writing team, is they really put in some fantastic work. So I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed.
I know you also do, writing as well too. Or were you able to bring any elements into your character, or were you stuck with sort of what was written on the script? Were you able to make any sort of adjustments kind of based on where you envision this character?
Well, again, they wrote it so well, I really didn't have to do any of that. But there's some points where you say, would it be okay if I said this instead of that? Something that might be more natural for me to say, or something. You do a little research, you hang around with a couple of cops in Chicago, and you get the lingo, you find a couple of things that you think might help bring a little bit more authenticity to the character. And they're always open to stuff like that. I mean, generally, what I find is, as long as you're not changing the story, you know, and if you're trying to change the story, you better really have thought it out and be able to present your case and argue your case, and it better be better than what they have. But no, I mean, it didn't come to that on this, but there were a couple of times where I asked if I could say something different, and they're very open. It's a collaboration at the end of the day. So I think everyone understands that, as long as you're not stepping on people's toes, and there's a way to do it, there's a way to speak to people, and you know
Yeah, definitely. Because from the interviews that we've done with a lot of the Sopranos cast, and obviously including yourself, and just watching some of the other interviews of castmates, like for example, Sopranos was a show where you had to read, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but really what was on the script was what needed to be performed, right? There wasn't a lot of ad-libbing on the Sopranos, for example.
well, that was my first job. So basically, at that time in my life, I didn't go to um I didn't go to college for drama or theater or anything like that. I kind of came to this in my own way, and walking onto a set really was about, for me, not wearing my pants at first, like and walking onto that show, in the second season, and again, that was my first audition. So walking onto a set for the first time, really, and getting acclimated to that and dealing with that was really what my challenge was. So basically, I was just memorizing a script and saying my lines. I didn't even think to, what if I said this, or what if I did that? There really wasn't any of that. So
Yeah.
I'm not the best person to ask in that regard. I think, my memories of Sopranos are basically just, being a little wide-eyed, and I look back at that now and I'm like, man, too bad I couldn't get to do that now, after years of experience and everything. But it is what it is, and you know,
Well, I mean, your character, right? I mean, we're still talking about him today, right? Sean. And yeah, definitely, like as a fan watching, I know you mentioned, like, you were green in the earlier seasons of Sopranos, and like earlier roles, like Analyze That. As fans, we would have never known that, because you were portraying such a tough guy. Like, you were so good, right? So we didn't know that maybe you were nervous, when doing those roles, right? Especially when you were trying to, whack Chrissy. You didn't look too nervous there.
no, there I wasn't nervous. There's certain things that were a little too close for comfort, where I wasn't nervous, to do those things. But then there were other parts where, you know, yeah, maybe a little more self-conscious or whatever. But yeah, listen, I look back on it all, and it's been an interesting road, it's been an interesting road, and I'm very grateful. I've been blessed and fortunate, and kind of got it just the way I wanted it, like I don't know. Yeah.
It's amazing, right? And definitely in store for more roles as well too, obviously, right? And I know the last interview that we had done, you were just starting, or you were going to go film the second season of Gravesend, which just came
Yes.
out as well too. And I mean, the cast is insane this year, right? I mean, really, really up the stakes. Andrew Dice Clay, Chaz Palminteri, obviously Vincent Pastore as well too. I mean, the cast is amazing. What was it like returning for this season?
I really like working with Will, because going back to what you were asking earlier about script and changing stuff, and he's very open to that. And I think we have a mutual respect, and he kind of trusts me, so he lets me sort of change things when I feel they need to be changed. He's been great with that. He's what he does is amazing to me, that he gets funding to do his stuff independently, his films, his television show. I mean, there's, you know, people who are much more established in the industry who've been there a lot longer who can't do that. And he does that, you know. I'm amazed at that. And then that he gets this cast that he gets, right? So yeah, I mean it's I enjoy working with him.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see that, like, we've upped the stakes, in season two. We went to go to Miami, right? I mean, I was getting Donnie
I didn't go to
Brasco vibe.
Miami. But yeah, they
Yeah,
did.
your scenes were all in New York, from what I remember, right? Right. I don't think we seen you in Miami, but like it really gave me Donnie Brasco vibes. Like I could have just had a full season in Miami. Like it was awesome.
Really? Yeah, I didn't get to go to Miami. That's the thing, man. I never, as an actor, I never really got to travel to the fun places to shoot anything. I want to go to Greece to make a television show or a movie, or to Italy or France, or I haven't had that luck yet. So no, I wasn't part of the Miami leg of it. Just all New York for me.
Speaking of Greece, yeah, man, you should have told me. We could have got you in my wife's, was it my wife's big Greek wedding 3? The third one just came out. Could would have been good to but no,
They shoot, is that actually shot in Greece?
that's a good question. I mean,
I know the first one was Queens, right? But did they end up in Greece? I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember, was it they did go to Greece. It was either this new movie, if I'm not mistaken, or the second one, but I know I think this new one they go to Greece. Don't quote me on that, but I know one of them was in Greece. I think it's this one because of the
Okay.
trailer. There's a story where they go and they're trying to like find their roots, and it's a this story looks pretty unique. Like it looks like it might be as good as the first, but yeah,
Oh,
definitely. I mean, that'd be awesome. And seeing if you're a lot of the shows and movies that we see in New York based, Chicago based, it'd be good to kind of see you go overseas. Like if we get you in Gomorrah,
oh man, that was the best. That is like
great show.
show. You know what's so interesting about the storytelling they do? Like they'll start an episode with, some random person who is affected by the Gomorrah, in a negative way. And then the episode will unwind to show how, this innocent person, has to deal with this basically, lecherous presence. And of course, it ends up bad for that person by the end of the episode. But the way they storytell, man, they don't give the audience much. They don't show the conspiring scenes sometimes, but it was really a lesson for me to watch that show and see how they do it, as opposed to the way we do it here. It's a little bit more spoon feeding the audience here. And that's what I love so much about that show. And they were ruthless, man. Holy crap.
To be honest, I mean, you were the one that put me on that show. Once we had our first interview, you mentioned it to me, and I had heard of it, but really started watching it more after we did our interview. And everyone that I have spoken since, because it is kind of like that best kept secret. A lot of people don't really know about it, but whoever's watched it says they love it. And I agree. Like I definitely really enjoyed it. Very authentic feeling. It's different from the iterations. I mean, I selfishly love the mob stuff we get here, but that really feels gritty. Like it's just really authentic.
Oh yeah, it's very authentic, and I mean, it all comes from that original book written by Roberto Saviano, about the Gomorrah, and he actually had to go into hiding after he wrote that book because they had put out a contract on him. And yeah, I mean, that's based in real stuff.
Something that I also kind of held, from the last time we spoke, regarding the late Harold Ramis, who you worked with during Analyze That. You mentioned something that he quoted where he said, hey guys, like, we're making a movie. Like, what I mean? Like we could be like, how fortunate are we to be in this scenario where we're making a movie? Like, there's things that are obviously like we're very fortunate. Is there anyone that you've worked with that you can kind of remember that you've learned from the most, whether it's like an actor, director, writer, where you feel like you've learned the most that you apply during your craft every day?
The first thing that comes to mind is a while back I had a film that I wrote that um we had attached Gabriele Muccino to. He's a director, he did Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith and 7 Pounds. And this was really an interesting thing, something that I never would have thought of, or it just opened up a whole new like level of imagining, in when it comes to this stuff and the creative. The film that I wrote was sort of a dark film, and he asked me who I liked for the lead role, and I said, I would love to see Joaquin Phoenix, someone like that. And he was like, he praised Joaquin, he's a fantastic actor. And he said, but to look at him is, he's dark and he's brooding and he's got dark hair. Like physically, he's got dark hair, and he looks like, someone who, really has been through it. And he said, I think because of the subject matter of the film, that it's so dark, that we need to look at someone who's light. So in other words, like a DiCaprio or a Ryan Gosling. This is going back 10 years, maybe even longer. And I never thought of anything like that, like that it kind of helps to balance the content of the film, because the film is a dark subject matter. So that was really interesting, and I would never have, come to that sort of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like that way of thinking about it or viewing it, really interesting. It opens things, like, oh wow, okay. And then you start to think about that moving forward, and it just, is like a chain reaction to other things that you never would have thought of, right? So that was interesting. But who else was
So light character that's so light they're actually dark.
well, light, just literally light to look at. He said like sunshine, like we need sunshine in the film. And because the subject matter is dark, and you're looking at these guys who have blonde hair and blue eyes and light skin, and that's like light to look at, as opposed to somebody who's brooding with dark hair, and the subject matter is dark, and it's just too dark if you do it that way. And but then again, you have the Joker, right? Which is dark, 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 and it's fantastic. So, but this wasn't that kind of film, Anyhow, I just I really, really responded to that, or it resonated and just made me see, wow, there's so much more to all of this than I ever even considered, And funny enough, I was the one who wrote the film, and I never even. So you meet lots of interesting people, everyone has a different way of approaching things. And who no, well, I remember stories about, Brando, right, where Brando would be on set and he'd be having a conversation like I'm having a conversation with you, and they yelling rolling, sound, all this stuff, and he's having the conversation, yell action, and he just turns around and goes right into the scene as if he, it's the same conversation without breaking it. And that kind of stuff has always been very helpful for me too, because it makes you really natural, like, because sometimes when they yell action, all of a sudden you become an actor, and everything changes, the way you talk and the way, and you're acting. I mean, you're acting either way, but there's a level of realism, and then there's a heightened thing, and then there's just you kind of losing yourself, so that was helpful. I like to do that kind of thing myself, like stay in conversation, stay loose, keep your voice going, and then go right into a scene,
Do you feel like, say today, obviously being, a vet, right? Now, are you having to have you changed your approach at all to acting? Like, did you have to do more research when you were younger to prepare for a role versus now maybe you could snap into a character because maybe now you could tap into past characters much easier? Like, has your approach changed now than what you're doing when you were younger?
Well, I think that all has to do with your approach, right? So for instance, when the acting teacher that I first studied with, it was kind of like there is no character, it's you, so you're finding those circumstances within yourself, and what you haven't experienced that you would have to play, it's imagination, right? So you would for instance, if I have to talk about my dog, and I never had a dog, right? Draw the dog, draw the exact dog you would have had. So now when you're talking about a dog, it's the specific dog you're talking about. But I there's different kinds of actors, and I think I'm again, I don't have that faculty to do the accents. It just didn't come to me that way. It's not even been an interest of mine. So a lot of the characters I play are very close to kind of, the world that I know, but yeah, the process has changed over the years. About 8 years ago, I moved back to New York and I started studying with this teacher, Carl Bury, who was, his influence on me has been like inestimable, like he got me to do things that I never would do before. Like he had me doing Shakespeare and stuff like that, and staying on my voice, and really, really, it was a huge growth learning experience for me. And really, funny enough, that's when I really started to work a lot, and it wasn't even so much that I was applying what I had learned from him or what he was teaching me, but I think it was just putting that effort in that direction. You're putting in an energy in a direction, and it starts to come back, like, you're creating like the momentum of it. I really don't know how to describe it, but that's how I kind of experienced it. So yeah, it has changed for me over the years. But you still need to prepare, like, for instance, I get the role of Bobby DiFranco. I don't really know what the gang situation in Chicago is, and you start to do that research, and you especially him, because my wife in the show is Black, and I have an understanding of the culture, as the character has an understanding of the culture, and he's not a racist cop. As a matter of fact, he's quite the opposite. He understands the predicament and the lack of opportunity. So in order to be a cop and have that perspective, there is research required. So the research is, yeah, in Worth, in that movie Worth, I played a fireman from 9/11. I had to go back to, I was here on 9/11 in New York, and that happened, and I knew a lot of people who died, and you don't realize that you bury it, because it's just, I mean, that day really changed a lot, and I think a lot of people had post-traumatic stress from that. They didn't even realize it, I mean, prior to, we were walking around and we've never been attacked, Pearl Harbor, but knowing most of the people who have experienced that, were old or gone by then, right? And then this thing happens in New York, and it's like, wait, we were attacked? How did that even happen?
Yeah.
And going back to do that research is that, a fireman, and a lot of the people I knew who passed were firemen, from Staten Island. And you go back into that, man, and it's eye-opening. But yeah, it requires some research, especially really for me, what that was about was tapping into that emotion again that you bury and that you try to block off, and remembering it. And yeah, that's what the research is. So everything, requires some research, and
and being able to tap into different parts of yourself. I really like the example where for example, like the dog example that you gave, right? Even if you didn't have a dog, draw what you would imagine your dog to be, right? Because now yeah, that's awesome. And right when I heard that, I was like, that's a great thing to pull from and to draw from, right? And same thing, you can use a car example, you can use it for anything, right? So
yeah, well, it's about specificity, right? So the more specific you are, the more specific the emotion and everything will be. And that's one of the most important things as an actor, is to be specific about the material you're using. And if you draw the dog the exact dog that you would want if you had a dog, right? Now, when I talk about this dog, I truly do have a specific dog in mind, and how I feel about that dog and what he looks like, and so I mean, imagination is the greatest tool for an actor,
Definitely right, and I'm sure that leads into, some of the writing that you do as well. And I know, you had mentioned that you it seems like you're always, creatively writing something, right? And you had scripts that you've written probably that are 10 plus years. What happens to those, right? Do those just sort of sit on a desk? Do you go back in and reread and retouch? Being an aspiring writer as well, too, right? Like I've written, a few scripts as well, and like once you finish, do you just leave it? Do you ever go back and kind of tap into that world again, or sort of what does that process look like?
Well, sometimes for me, I'll write something, and I think, I have my draft, and I've gotten it to the point, all right, I think it's there. And then maybe a year later, I'm walking down the street and I see something or hear something that, brings up that script in my mind. And I think, now with all this distance, and sort of in that distance, you forget the script, because you've moved on to other things, and you've have a little more life experience. And then sometimes you realize that draft that you have, or I realize the draft that I have is really just like a framework for something. And I didn't even really know what I was trying to say. But this thing strikes you all of a sudden walking down the street a year later, and you go back to it and rewrite it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I write, I have stuff optioned at the moment. I have people who are looking at some of my series, but man, it's so hard to get anything produced. It's frustrating. And I have novels, and trying to get that stuff published, and it's really difficult. It's difficult. I, I recently did a podcast where we were talking about going after your dreams, and the reality is, a man my age, after all these years of being in an industry where I have to rely on other people to move me forward, right? So I need agents and managers as an actor. I need agents and managers as a writer. It's a little, I feel kind of blocked, because you have all this. I'm all fire. I'm an Aries. I'm born Aries. I'm a Leo rising, right? Like I'm a doer. I'm not someone who sits around. I'm constantly writing. I'm constantly doing things, but I need other people to move them forward. That's so frustrating to me. I can't even explain to you. Especially people who a lot of these agents and managers are not particularly creative people. They're kind of like, it's a different mindset. It's a different disposition altogether. And I don't have that disposition, the business mind. That's not really what interests me. So I need somebody else to move it forward in order to turn it into a paycheck, and allow me to keep doing what I'm trying to do. So it's been a struggle. It's been tough. Maybe if I was more single-minded, just an actor, and I was more focused, I don't know. But it's tricky. It's been tricky. But writing definitely is something that I seem to not be able to live without.
Yep.
So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being, multi-threaded, right? Being able to act, being able to write, you can also bring that into, your craft every day. And I do feel, what you had mentioned, right? It's like you have this talent, you have something that's, sort of at the tip of your tongue, but it needs to be pushed by additional, members, right? That's sort of out of your control. And that's sort of, the world that I live in, right? Separately from the passion that I have, with MovieJunk, also obviously also work, a corporate job as well too, right? And being able to combine those worlds, one day is what I'm hoping to do as well. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't change anything that you're doing, obviously, right? Because it's gotten you to this point. But definitely, I do feel the passion, and then being able to elevate that content. That fire is what's gotten you to where you're at today.
yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. But you do all this writing, and it's really to share it.
Yep.
I don't really write. I don't write genre things, right? My scripts, my television shows, they're primarily drama, you know, but they're not genres. You know, I don't write fantasy, I don't write love stories, I don't write horror. They're not really generic. I mean, look, they say everything's been done, right? I guess to a certain degree, but I think what's idiosyncratic, what makes it different is your take on all of that, right? And that's pretty much been the issue, you know, is that I'm not writing the mainstream kind of stuff. And it's just not how, it's not the stuff I'm interested in. It's not what I watch. It's not what I read. You know, I kind of write the things that make me want to write. I kind of watch the things that make me want to write it, you know, write television or film. And they're definitely harder things to get made. Um, you know, I get the same kind of feedback all the time. Like a director just recently read a film of mine, and he was very, you know, complimentary on the writing, the story. He felt maybe I could turn it into a novel. He's like, but he's like, this is fantastic. It's dark. You know, it'd be a really hard thing to get made. That's also due to the locations, but and that it's a male lead and the subject matter. And you know, you got to think of all this, right? In this world we live in today, would I be better off writing the lead as a female? You know, and because you know those stories are maybe unrepresented, but or underrepresented, but you know, I'm not the guy to write that. You know, even and if I did write it, no one's going to make it because a man wrote it. You know, so that kind of stuff, like all that stuff, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. You know, um, I think there's someone out there who could write that better, and it's their experience. Let them write it. What do I know? The experience of a 40-year-old woman. I don't know that experience. You know, again, you can have an imagination, but they're less likely to go with the script a guy wrote about a 40-year-old woman than what a woman wrote about a 40-year-old woman, right? So anyhow, the feedback that I generally get is that the storytelling and the material is good, it's dark, and they're hard sells. And that says, okay, Chris, I guess you got to make your own movie. You got to find your own funding, and you need to make your own movie. You need to publish your own stuff, and I think that's the direction I need to go in, especially if I feel frustrated about other people moving my stuff forward, and especially because the kind of films and television stuff that I write, they're less likely to get made in today's market, especially film. They don't want to make a drama that isn't based off a best-selling novel, and the kind of directors who could get that stuff made, I can't get to. So it's tricky. It's tricky, again, that's why they say if you don't love this and you don't feel you have to do it, and there's something else you could do, go do that other thing, because this is a rough road, and it is.
Definitely from a fan's perspective, definitely if you ever, I'd love to read any of the content that you write. I mean, I'd be honored. And definitely from what I've been hearing as well too, from books and research that I've read, I often hear, write what you know. And then also too, when you, for example, you get an idea for a story that's just completely something that you're not familiar with, when you have the passion to want to make the story, there's research that can be done, right? Like Francis Ford Coppola, right? When he made Apocalypse Now, I think that was one of the scariest movies he said that he's ever made, because he had no idea what he was doing for making a war movie. He almost even went bankrupt making it, right. And even I'm drawing a blank of
That's based off Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad novel. Yeah, and he adapted it to the Vietnam War. And there's a great story about Brando on that he showed up. I forget I forget what the character's name was in that, but he was described in the novel as being gaunt. He was living in the jungle. He was very skinny, and Brando showed up bald and like 60 pounds overweight. And but that performance is phenomenal. So
Yeah, I love that movie, man. That movie's awesome. And they just 4 or 5 years ago they made a director's cut version of it where they added 40 minutes of additional footage. And I recommend whoever hasn't seen the director's cut to go watch it. Yeah, Francis pumped out a few director's cuts over the last like 6 years. He made a Godfather 3 director's cut, which I actually like even better than the original version that came out. And then there's 40 minutes of additional footage, maybe even 43 minutes of additional footage of the Apocalypse Now that maybe it's called Apocalypse Now Redux is what the official
I think
title
so,
is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing his new movie. He's made, I mean, look at his filmography, my God, like, I mean, he's made arguably, if you were to take the 10 best American films, he probably made four of them, which
hmm.
is pretty damn impressive.
Megapopolis. What's the name of the movie? It's
Is it Metropolis?
Metropolis. That's what it's called.
I wonder if it's a remake of the original. I just want to see anything he's doing. I also loved what was the one he did with Vincent Gallo? Um
Shoot.
Metro, was it, or something like that? No, I pet
Tetro.
pet, yeah. I love anything he does, he's yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's one definitely we got to put that on the bucket list to see you with as a future director to work with. Um, I do want to be respectful of your time, but I don't want to sneak in, if there's any upcoming projects that you're allowed to share that we could see on.
Just no, only right now is Force, the season of Force, and watch it. It's good. It's very good.
Definitely, definitely. I highly recommend fans. I mean, definitely, I mean, everyone's watching, Force now. Definitely tune into Starz. If you haven't seen Gravesend, go to Amazon Prime, buy the bulk season. That way you're getting a package, so you get every single episode of season two. It's an indie project, right? Totally self-funded. So, the more folks that we can get to tune in, we can get a season three. I kind of want to see this turn into a movie with the cast that we have there. I mean, why not? So definitely tune into Gravesend. If you haven't seen the first episode that me and Chris did, for Soprano fans, we dive a lot more into his experience there. But Chris, I just want to be again respectful of your time. Super thankful to have you return and pick your brain. It's always a blast. Thank you so much for returning today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I enjoyed it. It's always a blast for me too.
Thank you so much, Chris. Looking forward to sharing with the fans, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank
Take
you.
care.